Hey, First Baptist, it's time for Coffee with Chris again. Today, I've got special guest Justin Avery, one of our deacons and a longtime member of our church, and we're going to talk about finances today, kind of tie in with a special event we've got coming your way on January 29th. So grab a cup of coffee, let's sit down and have a conversation. Hey, First Baptist, as I mentioned earlier, got a very special guest with us today. It's Brother Justin Avery, longtime member of First Baptist Church Middleburg. Today we're going to talk about some important financial matters that will be very important for you as we continue our January sermon series on stewardship and just learning how to manage God's resources well. But before we go any further, just for members that maybe haven't had a chance to meet you before, Justin, just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to First Baptist and a little bit of the ministry you have here in our church.
So I didn't have much of my own effort involved with coming to First Baptist. My parents were actually already members here and faithfully attending when I was born. And so I have kind of the unique privilege of being a lifetime attendee here at the church. That means that, I met the Lord here through the faithful, preaching and teaching of the gospel. I was baptized here. I was married to my wife Lindsay here at this church, and then all three of our children have been born while we've attended. So I would say outside of my family, this church has probably been the next largest influence on my life.
That's awesome. Now, you serve in a number of different ways. You're a deacon here, and you lead a small group, and you serve on our personnel teams. Just briefly tell us a little bit about your small group and your service on the personnel team. What does the personnel team do at First Baptist Middleburg?
Right, so we have a great team that comes together on a quarterly basis to evaluate things like hiring practices, personnel policies and procedures, evaluations of staff, just making sure that anything that from an HR compliance personnel perspective is dutifully governed in the context of the church body. The staff, and particularly Pastor John, do a great job of leading out with regards to all the personnel activity. The personnel committee just kind of provides some oversight to him and to that function, and hopefully bring some wisdom to that process as well.
It's actually just a good extra layer of accountability to make sure that we're doing the job the church expects us to do. And we believe very strongly in accountability because we want to be good stewards of every single penny that's given to our church. And so if we're being paid to do a job, we want to be held accountable for doing that job as well as we can. And then you also lead a small group. Tell me a little bit about your small group. When do you meet, and what kind of people attend your group?
Right, so one of the highlights of my week is the ability to teach the Bible to a group of believers, and I've had the opportunity to do that for about 25 years now, various ages over the years, but for about the last 15 years or so, I've taught what were young adults, but then the church changed our binder, and now it says median adults. So I guess that we graduated out of young adults and into median adults. So that's the highlight of my week, and we meet at 9:20 on Sunday mornings.
That's fantastic. All right, so we're in the middle of this series called Living the Dream, and we're just talking about managing our resources well. One of the big things that we've been trying to communicate to our people is before we can be a good Samaritan, we got to be a good steward, right? We got to, if we want to be generous and help other people, we have to learn to manage our own resources well. And the better we manage our resources, both our finances and even our physical health and our time and those types of things, the better we're able to invest in the kingdom and invest in the gospel. And so I know you're a good steward. We've talked about this a little bit before, but could you tell us just a little bit about your own spiritual journey with regard to the stewardship of God's resources?
So, I think one of the best ways to do anything is to have a really good example to follow, right? So you're not figuring it out on your own and making mistakes along the way. And I had that growing up. I had parents that I saw, first of all, being very faithful with regards to giving a tithe. I saw the check, I saw the envelope going into the plate every single week. And beyond that, I knew that they were sacrificially giving. And so from a very early age, I saw that the tithe was just a part of worship. It was a consistent, dedicated part of their worship. And so it was easier for me to see that as part of my worship, when I started having things of my own. I think the other thing that I learned from my parents was that if you're just focused on the 10%, you're missing, the big picture. And you need to be focused on the 100% because 100% of it's God's. And so that means that you have the 10% that you give back, but you have the 90% that you dot your I's, you cross your T's, you watch every dollar. You're not immature with it. You are very intentional with how you spend your money. And when you do that, the 10% sacrificial giving, as we've covered over the last couple Sundays, gets a lot easier, right? Because you have that discipline there to be sacrificially generous. And so my spiritual journey, I would say in large part, was just based on having a really, really good example.
Amen. And pastoral influences, parental influences, all those things, they make a huge difference in our lives. So now you've taught small groups and mentored others in this area for a number of times. What are some common mistakes you see couples making when it comes to managing their money?
I think first and foremost, going back to my last comment, not realizing that all of it's God's.
Yeah.
And realizing that ownership and thinking that somehow that they have influence, which they do to a certain extent over how it gets dispersed, but they lose sight of the fact that ultimately God has a plan for every single one of those dollars.
Right.
And so you can either follow that plan or you don't. And one magnifies God and the other doesn't. I think one of the other mistakes that I've seen over the years is people just putting off changes that they know need to occur in their life with regards to finances. They stick their head in the sand and they hope that things are going to get better. And as I heard from somebody years ago, hope is not a plan.
Right.
It's just a hope. And there's usually not a whole lot of good that comes out of that. And so you really need to marry up hope with a plan. And so that's where budgeting comes in, a focus on debt reduction, keeping your spending in line with your income, things like that. A typical kind of Dave Ramsey type view of how to treat finances.
Yeah, which is a very biblical approach. I mean, we have to be good stewards and live within our means, and actually try to live below our means, because that's what gives us the freedom to be generous and to plan for the future and those types of things. So at the end of this month, First Baptist Middleburg is hosting a conference called Leaving a Legacy, and we're going to focus on some long-term financial decisions that impact probably our kids and our grandkids as much as they will us. So we're going to talk about wills and estates and trusts and planning and that type of thing. Now, it's tempting to think that wills and estate planning is something that I can wait till I'm a little older to take care of. Talk to our members here. Why is this a conference for everybody? Why does everybody need to make an effort to be here for this?
Yeah, I feel very strongly about estate planning and having a will in place. It's just part of that planning process and putting a plan in place to make sure that your resources are ultimately distributed in a manner that is also glorifying to God. I think for our younger folks, maybe people that are my age or younger, if you have a spouse, if you have children, you owe it to them to put a plan in place so that they don't have to figure it out if something happens to you. I think that that's just part of being an adult, right? And being a responsible adult is making sure that plan is in place. If you are an older adult and let's say you don't necessarily have responsibility to take care of a child anymore, right? They're out of the house. I think that's when you start looking at that legacy aspect of your life. What's going to happen with my estate? Certainly, you probably have expectations that your kids get some of it, but it's also a time to think about, well, will my kids, spend it the way that I would spend it? Would they utilize it the way I would utilize it? And is it an opportunity to perhaps identify some other organizations, including a church, that you can target and say, here's an amount that I want to go to that organization, that church in particular, or I think particularly in the context of what we do here, to help bless their ministries after I'm gone.
Right. Yeah, and those are both great ideas and great reasons why you need to do this. And if nothing else, you need to join us for this Leaving a Legacy conference, because it would be a great opportunity for you to think through these questions. My wife and I were talking about this the other day. I've been wanting to get a will for about 15 years, and I kept saying, well, I'm going to get it done next year. I never really set a hard date for. We're actually going to have an opportunity for you to make an appointment with someone at this conference where you can follow up and get a will done, that type of thing. And I'm committing in front of everybody, I'm going to knock that out this year. And so it's extremely important for us to think through that. And even for younger kids, but also if you're going to leave something for your older kids, if you're an older adult, as I'm increasingly becoming with each passing year. Just as a pastor, I've seen lots of families fall apart because they didn't plan, and it just creates all kinds of tension in the family when that's not there.
Yep.
So, hope you learned something today. I hope you enjoyed your opportunity to meet Justin Avery here. Hope you'll join us for our Leaving a Legacy conference. That's January 29th from 6 to 8. We're going to serve a great meal at 5:30, and we'll have lots of opportunities for you to grow in the future weeks from that if you'd like to learn more. Until next time, make sure you drink plenty of coffee, spend plenty of time in God's Word. We'll see you again soon.